Hello everyone. So welcome to our first lecture of science. Okay, we are going to start with the part 1 and we will be starting our science syllabus with the very first chapter. Okay, so the first chapter that we are going to discuss is gravitation. Now gravitation is not a new word for you all. We have studied this gravitation since our 5th standard. So we have a general idea of this particular term gravitation. Okay. So in this particular lecture, we are going to study types of forces. Okay. Now what is gravitation? We will have a general idea of it. Then first law of motion and obviously introduction to Newton, the man who discovered gravitation. Okay. So let us start then. So force. Now this gravitation is nothing but a kind of force. Okay. It is a force that has been experienced between two objects, between any two objects which is present in the entire universe. So before going to gravitational force, we must have a basic information about force. So what is force? It is a physical entity that causes change in speed, direction and motion of an object. Okay. So it is a physical parameter which affect the speed or direction or motion of an object. So for example, you can see here, okay, there is one man who is applying force to this trolley. Okay, so when he applies the force, then and then only that trolley is going to perform a motion. Okay, so this force is necessary to perform a motion. If we want to perform a motion, we need a force. Okay, and this force also determines the speed of that motion. If you apply more force, the speed is going to be high. If you apply less force, the speed is going to be low. Okay, so this is an important concept, and what it is a physical entity that causes change in speed, direction and motion of an object. Now forces are classified as contact forces and non-contact forces. So what is contact force? If there is contact between the two object, okay, where application of force is seen in these two object, if there is a contact, then that particular type of force is going to be called as contact forces. For example, take the same example. Now this man has applied a force on this trolley. So for applying the force, he had touched that trolley. Okay, so when that man is going to touch that trolley, that means it has made a contact with that trolley. So forces which are seen due to the contact between the two objects, okay, these forces are called as contact forces. Whereas non-contact forces, for example magnetic force, okay, now there is not a contact between these iron nails and magnet at the initial stage. Okay, at the beginning there is not a contact between these iron nails and the magnet. But as iron nails come nearer to this particular magnet, what happens? This magnet attracts those iron nails. Okay, now again a force is applied over here, but for applying this force there wasn't a contact between these two objects. Okay, so this is meant by non-contact forces, where forces applied but there was no initial contact between the two objects. Such type of forces can be considered as non-contact forces. Okay, so this was all about the types of forces. There are several more examples given here of forces. Frictional force is there. Okay, this force is important to perform a motion. Frictional force. Then gravity force is there. Applied force is there. We can call applied force as muscle force also if we consider human being or any animal, and if that human being or animal is applying force, we can consider that force as muscle force also. Okay, then drag force is there. Okay, Now drag force is similar to somewhat similar to beyond force. Okay, tension forces are there. Tension forces, you when you play a tug of war, or when you stretch a string or stretch a rubber, at that time the force developed in that string or rubber is nothing but a tension force. Okay, then magnetic force, common example, and spring force. Okay, so these are the examples of some kinds of forces. So this was about types of forces. Now we will understand what is gravitation. Okay, so as we know that gravitation was discovered by Sir Isaac Newton, and the famous story goes by that Newton was set under a apple tree, an apple fall on his head. Okay, and then he discovered the gravity. So this particular story is not 100% true. Newton was trying to discover a reason behind this force which is exerted by the earth itself. Okay, he was trying to discover that why all the objects in this planet are on the surface, why they are not in the atmosphere. Okay, he was studying about the Kepler's laws of motions, okay, from the beginning only. But when that apple fall on his head, he got an hint about this particular phenomena. Okay, and then he finally concluded his all experiments under a term called as gravitation. Okay, so now what is gravitational force? It is a force which is a universal force. Okay, gravitational force is an universal force acting between any two objects in the entire universe. So any two objects which are there in the universe, okay, they are going to exert some kind of force on each other, and that force is called as gravitational force. Okay, we are going to study universal law of gravitation in the upcoming lecture, and by studying that particular law we will get the exact idea of gravitation. Okay, now this man Newton had contributed in a vast manner in the field of technology and science. Okay, he had contributed in so many ways to the field of science. Now he was the man who also stated three laws for motion. Okay, so we have studied laws of motion in the ninth standard. So we will be knowing the first law. Okay, what is the first law? It states that force is necessary to change the speed as well as the direction of motion of an object. So if any object is performing a motion, that object will need some force to change its direction or to increase its speed. अगर कोई ऑब्जेक्ट मोशन परफॉर्म कर रहा है और उसको अगर अपने मोशन की स्पीड को इंक्रीज करना है या फिर उसको अपना मोशन का डायरेक्शन चेंज करना है, तो उसको फोर्स की ज़रूरत होगी. ओके, लॉ के अंदर एक और पॉइंट इंक्लूड किया हुआ है कि कोई सा भी ऑब्जेक्ट अगर मोशन परफॉर्म करना चाहता है, अगर ऑब्जेक्ट रेस्ट पोजीशन पर है और रेस्ट पोजीशन से उसको हट कर निकल के मोशन परफॉर्म करना है, तो उसके लिए भी उसको किसकी ज़रूरत होगी? फोर्स की ज़रूरत होगी. सो दिस इज द फर्स्ट लॉ ऑफ मोशन जो न्यूटन ने हमें दिया है. ओके, नाउ व्हाई दिस लॉ इज इंपॉर्टेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ ग्रेविटेशन? बिकॉज दिस ग्रेविटेशन इज ऑल्सो एक्सर्टिंग फोर्सेस ऑन सेवरल ऑब्जेक्ट. ओके, और ये फोर्सेस जो है वो हमें मोशन परफॉर्म करने के लिए हेल्प करती है. ओके, और जो प्लानिटरी मोशंस भी हो रहे हैं उसके पीछे भी रीज़न क्या है? ग्रेविटेशन है. प्लानिटरी मोशन का एग्जांपल अगर मैं आपको दूं, सो मून, टेक एन एग्जांपल ऑफ मून. ओके, ना मून रिवॉल्व्स अराउंड द अर्थ. अर्थ के अराउंड मून क्या कर रहा है? रिवॉल्व कर रहा है. नाउ दिस मून इज परफॉर्मिंग अ मोशन. ओके, सो ये मोशन परफॉर्म करने के लिए उसको फोर्स की ज़रूरत है. किसको? मून को फोर्स की ज़रूरत है अर्थ के अराउंड रिवॉल्व करने के लिए. अब ये फोर्स मून को किसने प्रोवाइड किया? ये फोर्स कहाँ से मिल रहा है मून को? नाउ दिस फोर्स दैट मून हैज गॉट, इट इज द ग्रेविटेशनल फोर्स एक्सर्टेड बाय द अर्थ. वो क्या है? ग्रेविटेशनल फोर्स है जो मून के ऊपर एक्सर्ट हो रहा है अर्थ का. ओके, सो दिस वॉज द जनरल आइडिया ऑफ ग्रेविटेशन. In the upcoming lecture, we are going to study centripetal force and Kepler's planetary law of motions. Okay, so until then,